Okay, that one goes there. Okay, and then I come over to this one and I hit the go live button, preview. Okay, and there we go. And I'm over here. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I hope that the world is treating you fair. That's all you can really hope for. I mean, I really hope the world's treating people wonderful. I hope that you are about to find a miracle in your stocking, or you're waking up next to the person you love. I hope the sun is shining, the birds are singing. I have with me today a maestro of brand alchemy, an interesting individual, Yuri Shvets, who's got a dazzling 19-year symphony in Seattle's design realm, having choreographed brand ballets for giants like Starbucks, REI, and Tropicana. Yuri's portfolio reads like a hit parade of visual poetry. From the stages of Hornall Anderson to the canvas of Lemley design, his artistic notes resonate with the rhythm of iconic brands. Yuri, thank you for being here, my friend. I hope you're having a beautiful day. How's it going?
It's wonderful. Just hearing you say that, George, I wanna if you wanna imagine, like, if you were to put all that in poetry that you just cited, and you made a 50-feet billboard out of that and put it at the New York Square, right in the middle of all this zoo. Wow, how would that speak to people? Like, I obviously, I'm a little bit more humble than how you depicted me, hopefully still, but I do appreciate the poetry of words. You said it in such a vivid fashion that it makes me wanna know that Yuri that you just painted so beautifully. I want to know about him more.
Well, I think that is the wonderful part of language and words and symbols and perspective and behavior. And I think that's one thing probably of many that you do well, is you have a really unique understanding of communication. And that's one of the reasons I would love to talk to you today. You've maybe give us a little bit of a background of how you came, who you were before I found you today, before you were the guy you were today. How'd you get involved in all these things?
Very interesting question. I think I would have to go all the way back to my childhood when I didn't want to go to kindergarten because my parents forced me to go for the reasons that I would be, for all other things, I would be drawing there. And I told them, guys, I'm not going because I hate drawing. Little did I know that drawing will become my kind of segue to the world of fine arts first, and then design, a few decades later. So I guess I just naturally started doodling, maybe, I don't know, first couple of weeks into kindergarten. Maybe the hate dissipated too at the same time, I don't know. And I never stopped doodling. I did stop drawing, meaning I haven't been an artist, what is it called? Artist by trade, fine art, right? Because I have been that. I have been a painter before I became a designer. And my wife still hates me for Yuri. You haven't painted neither me nor our child or our beloved cat. And it's such a shame. And I go, honey, I love you and I love all my family, including the cat, but I just don't paint anymore. Not because the spark has evaporated. I just switched muses, and I switched them when I was in my early 20s. I got way more fascinated with the world of graphic design and a little later branding. And not that I lost any interest in fine art. I still go to galleries and museums, and I love listening to podcasts about great artists of all sorts. But I don't feel the need to pick up a brush and do something with the brush or traditional tools. Obviously, since I'm in design, I do a lot of what's called creativity on demand, which involves all sorts of graphic output, right? Sometimes it's illustration that looks very traditional. Other times it would be something crazy, future is back type of thing. And it's all, creative and it's something that I express through images and words, but it's not a traditional form of communication as it was for me for my life prior to design. The first time I designed something without knowing that I'm designing is so I kind of grew up in a rough neighborhood, and most of it was in the 80s. So when I was in my early teens, most of my friends were metalheads, right? So they loved heavy metal and thrash metal and speed metal and all this Iron Maiden there and Megadeth here, and I hated it religiously. I was a little bit more like, this, I don't know. Now you'd probably call it metrosexual or something. I was into new wave, and aha was my weapon of choice because it was melodic, beautiful, and different. But these guys didn't necessarily bully me or hate me for being different. They thought, oh, this guy can draw. How about you don't subscribe into our belief systems about all those amazing metal bands, but how about you paint the shit on our leather jackets, and you know what, we might even pay you. How about that? And I go, I don't know about that, but let me think. And so 3 days later, I'm painting all these horrific monsters trying to represent something like Iron Maiden on some cheap Turkish leather shirt on a guy who I don't know how he got this shirt, and I mean the leather jacket, and then I'm using oil paint, trying to replicate the Iron Maiden logo. That was the first logo. Obviously, I didn't create. I just tried to emulate it best I could, right? And then this horrible looking but amazing for them and worthy of admiration monster along with that logo. That was my informal entry into the world of branding, even though I don't know, is it branding or is it trying to hoax something with very limited means and zero knowledge, and also probably very little interest in the subject matter, right? But then, of course, if you segue into the world of reality and so-called professionalism, I did go to Cornish, which is a private school for art and design in Seattle. It's actually just celebrated over like 100 years, just very recently, I don't know, a few years ago. And I was privileged actually to study in their former building that they moved recently to downtown, but they used to be in Capitol Hill. And it was an amazing brick kind of, I don't know, very British looking structure with just, I think it was just 4 floors, and it was channeled after Bauhaus. So, on one, if you remember, or if you know that Bauhaus, the whole system was about trying to fuse the different forms of art, right? So they didn't distinguish between fine arts, design, and other things. They felt that if you want to call yourself, well-rounded, creative, or man, you have to practice everything, right? So we commingled with fine artists, theater people, ballerinas, musicians, all in the same, in this whole beehive called, design school. And I love it. I still love it. Not that it was, it wasn't perfect, but I love it, right? So that experience of being exposed to different art forms and also trying to chisel kind of your way into what you can say with your tools, that made me, I think, a better designer, because I'm not just looking in. I'm very curious about other mediums, other disciplines, be it philosophy, art, psychiatry, maybe a little less, even though well, no, I think psychiatry too, to a degree, but maybe more like subconsciously versus like studying something and taking courses or grasping knowledge directly from folks like you. So anyway, I can run on. Like, ask me something.
Yeah. No, it's important. I think it's foundational to understand someone's mindset, because what I hear is someone explaining the way in which they use language, be it theater, be it art, be it words, be it symbols. You're explaining to me how you communicate through graphic design. And I think that's the story that we're beginning to see. And when I hear it, like, it's beautiful to me. I do see it as poetry, like, wow, this is the first stanza, or these are the first lines in which this masterpiece is coming together. And I think you have begun filling in these ideas about behavior, perspective, perception. And it must, for someone like yourself, if someone comes to you and is like, Yuri, here's my product, or here's my service, like, what goes through your mind? Do you see that person's ideas? Do you see that person's dreams? Do you try to put yourself in that person's perspective? Do you try to see what they're trying to get? Like, what is that relationship like when someone comes to you and is like, hey, can you help me design something? Like, what do you see in that person and in that product? What goes through your mind?
Well, it's actually deeply, it's more philosophical than people realize it being, at least for me. Yeah. So there was this, I forgot his name. He's European. He's a public speaker, and he said once, and it really spoke to me and kind of sunk pretty deeply into my psyche. So he said something along the lines, if you do not have soul injected and kind of infused into your venture, you will always be a product, but never a brand. And, if you start deconstructing what it means, it goes pretty deep, right? So we all create something in the form of, in the world of commerce, we all create something as an output, be it a physical product or a service. And there's a lot of us doing very similar things, whether we create, new, I don't know, beverage, or we come up with some, I don't know, intellectual venture or things in the realm of, like, be it virtual reality or artificial intellect and all that. But at the end of the day, most of the things that have been around, but people keep doing them, they're not that different from one another. With an exception of AI being so new, and yet already some people are getting tired of it, because not all of this output is positive, although you cannot paint it as negative either. But that's still more or less novel thing. Most of the other commercial products, there's very few differences between them to begin with. And then even if they ever had differences, so for example, take, original iPhone and original everything before the iPhone came to being, right? That was a revolution of thought before anything, because iPhone suddenly created the need for something people didn't even think they have that need for, right? And it became not just a tool, it became an extension of people's hand. And then, everybody kind of tagged along, and here we are. It's a point of no return. We cannot be without our devices. We feel like somebody cut your arm if you lost your phone for like freaking 3 hours, right?
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate, but at the same time, it describes us as this kind of new community of 24/7 connected individuals or collectives and all that. But coming back to branding, when clients come to me, they come to me with products or services that are not exactly different from one another. But it's my job to tap into their inner selves, to uncover something that is still uniquely theirs, so that then I can bring it into the foreground and really give to the world something that is special and not fake, not something that's manufactured, not something that, like people in boiler rooms kind of conceive, whether it's like marketing gurus or advertisers. I need to get deeply under the skin of each client to first almost like a kid, get fascinated by what they do. And then hopefully that curiosity and genuine kind of interest in what they do, for the time being that we are connected and trying to grasp what it is that they do, then it's a lot easier for me to position them and make them appear really not just positive, not just but unique and interesting in public eye.
Yeah.
And that doesn't matter if again, if the product or service is almost indistinguishable, because people, as we know by now, do not just buy products because they are either novel or cool or different. There's that novelty factor that always will surround us and accompany our actions. But beyond that, people buy into the ideas, right? They love certain things or products or services because people behind them, they get attracted or otherwise, they either get attracted by them or turned off by them, right? I mean, the same thing you can. That's why, like, Tesla is so interesting. Is that at any given moment, Elon Musk can do something either outrageously positive and amazing for humanity, and then the next week can come up with something that will probably kill 30 or 40% of his vivid, tribesmen who loved him just a week before, right? Even though there's some hardcore fans who will probably to Mars with him no matter what he spits out on Twitter or X, whatever, right? But the point is, we're driven by either singularity of something or someone who has this hold, right? And so he and people like him, they have, that's why we call them visionaries, right? They take us further. Sometimes we don't want to go there, but they are movers and shakers to a certain extent, right? And the thing is that, of course, like, for me to love Tesla, I kind of need to a little bit fall in love with Elon Musk. And every time he hijacks that positivity from my perception, inadvertently, I start liking Tesla less, right? I mean, it should be not that related, right? I mean, because after all, if he's putting out amazing product, for example, right? I mean, as a consumer, well, you should just appreciate it and forget about, like, his private life or his his statements here and there and everywhere. But I cannot turn it off because I buy him and the car and everything that comes next as kind of branches from that, from that entity visionary of Elon Musk, whoever he is. But I'm also willing to take him as what he represents, meaning that he's flawed, he's deeply flawed, and yet in some ways he's still an example for so many people because he is a leader and he's a pretty magnificent thing. He's just not amazing at everything, and people have to realize that just because he's very bright in so many aspects, it doesn't make him God and it doesn't make him guru, but we still can learn a lot, right? So on a micro scale, that was a long segue back to every client that I have, regardless of their size and scope. It could be a coffee shop next door with not a lot of money on the table. But if I get excited about, like, after talking with a founder, of that coffee, how this coffee came about, why, and why should people care? Once I start caring, it's a lot easier for me to carry this, I don't know, sense of excitement or something that was revealed to me. Then I give it the most appropriate and relevant visual form, if you will, with the hope that it will also attract others. That's what it really comes down to. From idea to physical embodiment of that idea through a graphic form and abstraction, right, of that idea. So that's, sorry for the long answer.
No, it's necessary. I love it. I think it speaks to the idea of the soul and, really getting in the life of the idea. Like, it has a life of its own that it takes on, and it's contagious. It speaks to the idea of being contagious in this thing that people want to participate in. When I think of Tesla, I think of all the people that see themselves in a leader of sorts. Like, I like this person's spirit of courage. I like this person's spirit of adventure. I do not like this person's spirit of authority, or I do not like that. But everybody gets an opportunity to see themselves as Elon Musk when they look at him and when they drive his product or they get on his platform or something, like they're participating in this contagious, wonderfully, or perhaps awful in both senses of the word, dream. You know what I mean? And it's cool to get to participate in that on some level. I can understand how. Is it draining? Is it time consuming? Is it exhausting to try to put yourself in someone else's dream like that and then convey it to other people? What kind of toll does it take on you to do that? Is it difficult? Is it fun? Is it hard? Is it easy?
It's not necessarily hard. It can be a little bit more exhausting if I don't know the subject matter well enough, right? So as a consumer, it's a lot easier for me, for example, to design, let's say, something in the realm of, let's say, food and beverage, right? Because here I easily put on two hats. I am a branding expert, but I'm also a guy who is either gonna drink your liquor or I'm gonna hate it. I'm gonna tell my friends that don't go there, right? So you better have a good product to begin with, right?
Yeah.
So that's a lot easier because then your previous experiences help you, and just you being there, sharing this piece of earth with others, you can gain a lot of knowledge just walking the earth. However, with some other fields, especially in the realm of, let's say, when I like a few years ago, I've branded a company that was called, they actually, since then they changed the name. It was called Exxon VR. That was a time when VR was becoming this big new thing. And I had zero knowledge about VR and zero interest, coincidentally, right? So of course, then it puts you a little bit more on your toes because you have to do more research, you have to dig a little deeper. You can't just rely on your intuitions, previous knowledge. You really have to reveal yourself and to yourself that, wow, you know nothing about it, and you better, have a little bit more grasp here before you can start making either intelligent or then graphic decisions on your client's behalf so that they ring true, right? So I wouldn't call it draining, but yet some projects, of course, take more from you just physically because of the amount of hours and sometimes days you need to spend on just research, like trying to understand the nature of the beast, if you will, right? But I argue that if you don't do that, because there's some designers that they choose certain industries where, let's just say, they would swim more comfortably because it's either second nature, or let's just say if you are an avid outdoorsman, right? For you to design something for REI would be a second nature, right? You probably do it in your eyes closed, right? Well, guess what? When I did REI, not only, it's safe to say now because it's been many years, but what people don't know is that it was my very first branding project on this scale, right? Was I horrified? I think I was either too young or too stupid to be horrified, because if I did, I probably just say, guys, I cannot do anything here. You should teach me how to. But luckily, I had an amazing boss at the time, David Lemley, who also happened to be, he had to have experience on me and years of experience on me. And he was, in a way, my mentor. And there was only two of us at the time. And two of us, me and him, we conceived that new rebrand manifestation of very, like, it was Seattle's darling. I mean, if you were to ask me before that, I probably wouldn't even know that REI was headquartered in Seattle, because I cared very little about camping. I hate to be in a tent. I probably was in a tent maybe twice in my life. Both times I regret it. I'm a through and through city child. But guess what? When you put in that position, when you know little about that world, and then you just start exploring various rabbit holes to get your ways in, you start enjoying the ride and the process, because what I never lacked is the curiosity, because I am led by curiosity since the childhood. that's what keeps me on my toes, because I never proclaim to be an expert in everything. And then there's that desire to always learn something new that then benefits either particular project or particular client or particular graphic output, because I can look at the world from different perspectives. Sometimes, interestingly enough, I need that external force, meaning in that sense, it's a client, right? So guess what? After I've gone through REI rebrand, I've learned a great deal that I could then speak as an avid outdoorsman. I would understand the language, the gear, what they go through, and all that, because I learned a lot just by doing and experiencing certain things. And so I think those external forces and triggers are very important. So designers who, for example, only choose something that's comfortable, right? Like some designers will be just designing, let's say, in a food and beverage department, because guess what? Every designer on earth would love to work in that world. Like, you know, whether you're designing your next, I don't know, cold press juice, or you're designing your next, I don't know, gear for a sport company or something. You know, like these are givens, these are fun things to do. But if you're just limiting yourself to what's convenient and known, there's just not that much room to grow. And after a while, you'll start getting stale, fat, and comfortable, and you'll start losing the edge. And so I actually love the fact that I get to work on virtual reality assignment 1 week or month, and then move and work on something entirely different, or like white collar type of assignment here, and in very blue collar, where I have to understand that person who works with their hands, the craftsman, who I don't get to hang out on daily basis. I get to be either their friend or confidant, or learning from that type of individual. It also benefits me even beyond the job, you know? So that's what's, I think, fascinating about my field, because it kind of, I guess it makes me a little bit of a chameleon, but not in a negative way. Like I absorb all the learnings and insights from every client I get to interact with, no matter how short. But again, it's not that short. I mean, my typical project takes at least, I want to say, a month, right? So that's full immersion. Sometimes it's so big, like when the scope is big and it's literally clocking in 40 hours within that month, right? I almost forget that the world outside exists. I mean, some people can call it flow. Other people can say, Yuri, did you forget that you also happen to be a father and a husband, and you need to feed the cat? Yes, there is some negative aspects of that too, when you completely lose your mind and go too deep. But the beauty of it, though, is that level of full immersion is kind of rare. So when you get to that truth that you're digging into, it shows in your output. Because if you sidestep or shortchange the process and get less hours into research, or just trying to understand that, like, you know, how many ways you can skin that cat, then you end up with very convoluted solutions, because then you just essentially end up repeating the same formulas, right? And I try to avoid that as much as possible as a designer. Sometimes it's unavoidable, because certain solutions, they're already in your head and they're popping first. That's why I always tell younger designers, guys, the first solutions, for the most part, you come up with, there's 99%. These will be trashed, because it's cliches that overpopulate our brain, and we just access something that's either we already know about, heard somewhere, saw somewhere, Googled before and forgot. And that's why, for the most part, it will be junk. And you need to still put it on paper and play with it, and then maybe you'll get to something. But don't believe for a second that just because you spent half an hour on a job, yes, there's exceptions to the rule. I've known some legendary designers who would doodle something on a napkin during the corporate meeting, and that little doodle become a multi-billion-dollar brand. That happens, but not very often. So
Yeah, thank you. It's fascinating to see the level at which true design comes to life, and it speaks to the idea of growth. It speaks to the idea of storytelling. It speaks to the idea of the unknown. Like, how can you convey what someone's dream is or someone's idea is in an hour? Like, you can't. Like, you have to live that life. Like, you have to put on that skin. You have to thoroughly understand what that product or that design or that service can mean. You have to imagine what it can mean if you want other people to fall in love with it. It's, you know, as a brand architect, how do you approach the philosophical aspect of persuasion through language? How does language become a powerful tool in influencing consumer behavior?
wow, that's a tough one.
I know.
Well, interestingly enough, I probably, to a degree, a wrong person to ask this question for two reasons.
Okay.
English is my second language, right? So that's one and very important aspect of why I'm not the right person. Second, as a designer, I am weaving my narrative predominantly through images,
Right.
and a little less so through words. Although sometimes it's not interchangeable, but it is interconnected. So oftentimes in my designs, I will employ copy in the form of headlines or some statements or something, even though I don't actively or officially promote that, because I will oftentimes tell my clients, guys, you're not hiring me for those type of things. For this, for example, if you want somebody to write you an amazing mission statement, that has to be a brand strategist and a copywriter, some amazing wordslinger who will put in other words, they will have to understand what it is underneath you that drives you and makes you tick. And then they will use their own magic to put it so that it becomes poetry, right? I can do that, but that will not be a natural thing for me to do, because this is not what I went to school for. But because I'm a thinking man, I sometimes do that. I just don't advertise that so that I'm never held accountable, because I say, for this, yes, rest assured, you probably want to involve, experts in language, right? So I'm not shy to put words along my images. It's like I said, because, well, ironically, I also believe in the power of images, in that proverbial sense that an image is worth 1,000 words, right? In that sense, like, how do you create something where people can look at something and then have so many readings just by looking at your graphic visual output, where there's only like one or two photos or illustrations and one or two words, and yet it paints a whole new world for them. If it's I don't know, if it's just surface level, and if it's just pretty and cool, it will fall short, and you will fall flat on your sword very soon. It has to have some depth, right? So I go deeply into each project so that I can uncover that essence behind each client and a project. And words play a great deal. It's just I'm motivated probably more by images first, and then words naturally find kind of its way into it. But sometimes I do take on a different hat. It does happen where I would say, enough with doodling, let me just pretend I'm a writer. And when I put on that hat, I'm almost like a method actor, and I try to express the meaning of something through words first, and then I would redeploy them and see how they jive with images, and vice versa. So it's never like, it's never literal. It's not a literal process, but it is fun. Like I said, I wish, because I'm always fascinated with those amazing, like original, like traditionally well-known ad man, who would create this amazing 3-word headline that you just read it and it's nothing but poetry, right?
Yeah.
Like then you don't even care whether people will buy this product or not. You just go, wow, how can somebody can put 2 or 3 words together and then it's something indescribable, because again there is depth that then sublimates into something succinctly short and concise. But to get to that simplicity, somebody has to be very, very well read and very complex, and people gravitate to that, right?
Right. Well, do you see images as symbols, or what for you? What is the relationship between imagery and symbolism?
Well, so I specialize in brand identity design. That's my forte. That's also my calling, I believe.
Yeah.
I love, well, first of all, from all the aspects and all the categories within the field of graphic design, right? Branding and brand identity is something that I call innately belonging to my calling, so to speak, more than other disciplines, because it's a little bit more, what's the word I'm looking for? Evergreen. Because majority of graphic design is ephemeral. Is that a word?
Yeah.
Right? What it means is that if it's advertising, it's seasonal, right? So people move from winter holidays theme to a spring whatever, right? And so it's supposed to change all the time and kind of sync up with people's moods of the day, of the months, of the year, all that stuff, right? And it's fun and games, but it has a very short, shelf life, right? And so as a result, it interests me a little less, because I still wanna, maybe that fine artist that hasn't completely died inside me.
Yeah.
He wants something of more formidable and more of a substance, right? So if you think of logos, right, that's what I do pretty much. Most of my waking hours are focused around designing brand identities and logos. Logos are those symbols that's supposed to embody the meaning and essence behind each brand in a more simplified and almost rudimentary, but not quite, fashion that sometimes should be unilaterally understood, and sometimes even without you speaking the language. So almost like if you can't even read Japanese, but the symbol you somehow will react to, and if it's done well, you will unavoidably have a positive reaction to the symbol, and then it will potentially make you want to find out what this brand about, what they're selling, blah blah blah. So I work in the realm of symbols, because at the end of the day, these are the signs that represent bigger ideas, but they have to be packaged in this seemingly simplified form. And just like with headlines, that it's a lot harder to achieve this 3-liner that bewilders you. Well, logos are also a lot harder to actually do than many people assume. So as a result, by the way, I'm not the most cost-effective designer, because I actually try to create value, not just some cool thing that then just sits somewhere in the upper left corner of your website. I don't do dingbats, not your website. I'm saying in general, right? At the end of the day, some people may say, "Oh, why am I supposed to pay? It's just this little thing, right? That I know it's a little." No, it's a sign of. It's something that represents you. It's better be good then, right? Because if it sends the wrong impression, well, then you're gonna lose God knows how many percentage of your buying audience. So it better be good. So that's why I'm trying my hardest to do something that makes meaning, and then potentially communicates this meaning to a larger audience, that then helps to see this product or service not in a cheesy, phony, superficial, artificial light, but it's bringing something of essence to them, which otherwise they wouldn't be able to grasp or know or care, right? So that's easier said than done in my book,
Yeah, I think in everybody's book, it's important to understand the value that underlies images and the relationship it has to the way we think and the way we communicate. I find images and symbols fascinating. When you start looking at each letter can be looked at as a symbol or an image. And that's an interesting concept too. When you think about, at least in the English language, we teach kids the letter, and then they teach them a word, and then they teach them a sentence, and then they teach them a paragraph, and then they teach them a book, and then they teach them like a series of books. But they teach this linear way of thinking. Language on some level teaches people to think like this, instead of this exponential way of like, take this idea and then move this one over here. Instead of creating this imaginative world where anything is possible, we're taught just to stay in this lane and focus down that road. But I'm kind of bird walking here. Do you believe there are universal images that transcend cultural differences?
I believe so, yes. There's not that many of them, because that's why we've been pretty much redeploying, because there's something called collective knowledge, right? Because at the end of the day, if you go all the way to like something like pyramids of Giza, right, what you see scribed in those and engraved in stone is essentially logos and symbols, right? I mean, they're, what do they call, petroglyphs or something. There's certain things, the eye says vision, and that came from that guy looking into the stars, whatever, the gods and all this. We are driven by mythology and ancient civilizations, all these things that no longer exist, but gave us some initial graphic forms, right? I mean, the power, like, for example, what's interesting is that sometimes, of course, it has a negative effect. So, for example, as you may know, swastika was not always a negative symbol, right? But Hitler hijacked it, stole the original meaning. I don't remember whether it was some Indian, it was one of those Indian
I think it
tribes,
was from India,
right? And so now, few generations later, of course, some generations already dying, never even knowing, never being able to even grasp that swastika was not always negative. But it's such a powerful symbol that I don't know how many generations or light years on Earth, whatever it will take, before somebody will be able to shake off Third Reich from it and then give it back to the world for what it meant to begin with. And I don't remember for sure what it meant, but it clearly didn't mean annihilate as many people of certain type and all that, right? And so, but that also communicates, ironically, the power of branding, because people can talk about Nazis, but they cannot talk about Nazis without, in some ways, almost admiring the beauty of their uniforms, of the design, of the entire design of Third Reich. Was an amazing, one of the first bewildering corporate identities ever made, right? And so what can be learned from that? How you can communicate with so little, like, they use color red, by the way. Coca-Cola also uses color white, and then they're all, and so there's like very minimal forms, and that one symbol that every time I look at the symbol, it gives me shivers, because it's loaded with so much information. And of course, all of it is so profoundly horrific and negative that it's hard to divorce just a simple 4 lines, crisscross something, right? That's your logo at its most profoundly effective and profoundly horrific at the same time. But if you bring it back to like positives, that's why people gravitate to the most kind of, I'm scared to use the word simplicity, because it's not the right word to describe it. But at the end of the day, when you look at Nikes and Apples of this world, they are extremely boiled down abstractions, right? And so and along with golden arches of McDonald's, right? Like, what does that have to do with burgers, right? Somebody said, well, yeah, but these are like actually French fries made into the letter M, or like golden arches. Well, that's not how people think, though. They just right. It's subconsciously you just connected to it because McDonald's have been around for like not that much shorter than Egyptian pyramids, at least for American, history, And so in that regard, it's ingrained in your psyche, and you don't deconstruct it. You just take it for what it is, and it's a powerful visual symbol that, quite frankly, at this point, doesn't even need the word McDonald's next to it, right? I mean, you look at those arches, and you're either gonna say, well, I'm craving a good cheap burger, or steer clear from those guys because you know what they're selling, right? That's a powerful, in other words, little simple forms communicate a great deal of complexity, because you always layer on, collective knowledge and politics, and, specific way of being in a particular country. But the global brands have to transcend that, because they have to suddenly communicate concepts that used to be local to a much, much wider audience. That's why I think it's a lot harder to design for global clients. And, Tropicana, for example, we had to work on like all 4 continents, and tested, products with so many different types of people who appreciate different things, believe in different things, attracted to different things. It is a lot harder. But at the end of the day, we're all human. We have quite a big number of shared beliefs that makes us very relatable. That's what we need to grasp. That's what makes certain things more transcendent than others, is that when we connect to the common humanity and then add a few flavors that make individual tribe different from another, it becomes a lot more effective, right? But that means more research, more trying to grasp what makes us different and what makes us similar, right? So
it reminds me of embroidery a little bit. Like on one side you have this beautiful image, but if you turn it back around, there's all these little shortcuts and stuff hanging out, and like
the mess behind.
Yeah, totally.
It's almost like roots, right? Like it's all messy. And maybe that's an interesting way to describe. It's a beautiful, again, very poetic of you, right? So people hardly ever look at that because they just, well, it's a mess. What is there to find? But in a way, kind of almost describes this, I don't know, messy, non-linear world of creation, that there's something that is very intertwined, if you will, and not always polished, beautiful, and succinct. But then what you see, then it has become or given that precise, boiled down, beautiful graphic form, right? That then becomes this little shiny object that so many people gravitate to, right? Or proud to wear on their sleeves, right? So.
It's fascinating to think about all the work that goes into that, and most people get to see the polished product, or I like the way you say to put that badge on and be proud of it. But maybe what really people are doing is they are proud of all the work that went into it. And you start looking at the messaging, when the true message of that patch comes through, it's like, wow, that's what it means. And like, maybe that's where the power comes from all those images.
No, absolutely. And I want to add, George, that oftentimes when clients come to me, or any designer for that matter, the prerogative is to get the brand going and become more attractive to the audience. That's like given, and that's something that obviously that's primarily what I'm paid to do. But I oftentimes have to remind them that branding is not just outward facing mechanism to get you more buying audience and to get you stand out more from your rivals. It's also inward facing, because the logo that I'm creating, it better look good on your workforce, whether they're wearing this hat in a corporate meeting or a picnic with friends where they don't have to exemplify you anymore. So guess what? If your logo sucks, they're not gonna put that t-shirt on or that hat on, because suddenly they are allowing themselves to divorce themselves from that brand that they have to represent from 9 to 5. And guess what? If your brand is sound, beautiful, and communicates something beyond the obvious, they will wear that in less than formal settings, and they will continue promote this brand forward, because that's the testament of how much they as individuals actually believe in you as a visionary, as if you're a founder, and then how much they carry that brand on their sleeves when they don't have to or nobody prescribes them to, right?
Yeah.
People don't think about it that way, but it's just as important.
Yep. Yeah, I love it. Yuri, you know what happens to me when I speak to incredibly fascinating and just people that think outside the box and that I really resonate with and I'm really proud to talk to? What happens to me is my time flies like by like that. And just like that, we're like at an hour and I have like,
Really?
oh my God. I know. And I normally have longer time set aside, but my wife needs to use the workstation down here. I love it, man. I hope you'll come back and I hope we can have more discussions, because I think we just barely scratched the surface of so much cool ways in which people can identify things they want to do and the meaning behind what you're doing, man. But before I let you go, where can people find you? What do you have coming up and what are you excited about?
So, well, my website is eurikacreative.com, spelled in a weird way because it starts with my name. So it's YURI, right? KA creative.com, not EURAEKA, but it has the same origins, right? That's like a little bit of a double entendre there.
Love it.
So you can always find me there. But I'm actually, more than anything, I'm very active on LinkedIn. So yeah, please follow me, find me. I try to put a post a week. It's not always possible, but at least I strive to be proactive on LinkedIn. I love it. It's a great audience, very rewarding. And so we'll see what will come. There's a few interesting things that I'm interested in, but as we never say about, right, a fisherman never counts the fish until it's done. So thank you for asking that, though.
Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, go down to the show notes and check out the links. And what you got to see today was merely a glimpse, a strand in the tapestry of the artwork that Yuri puts into his work. And I hope you'll go down, you'll check everything out. I hope you got to see a quick glance of who he is and why he's so passionate and why the work that he does exudes that passion. Go and check it all out. You'll see what I'm talking about. There's the fine art. There's the whole embroidery factor of it. But that's all we got for today. Look, Yuri, hang on briefly afterwards. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you have a fantastic day. That's all we got. And I'll talk to everybody soon. Aloha.
Thank you so much, George. Thank you for having me. It's been